Hi, and welcome to Rethinking Education, the series of videos where I talk to some of the most interesting voices in education about their ideas on teaching and learning. I'm Dom Trainer. I'm Adobe's Education Evangelist for Europe, Middle East and Africa. And in today's video, I'm talking to Joycey John. Hi, Joycey, how are you?
Hi, Dom. Good, how are you?
Yeah,
Thank you
very
for
well.
having me.
No problem at all. It's my pleasure. I chased you down to get you on this one. So, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, just for people who are listening, I first met Joycey when she was at EF Education, which is a language education company. And since then, Joycey, you've gone on to do things at the National College of Digital Skills and Nesta as well. Could you give us a little bit of an insight on what those two things are? Because I think those two in particular are really relevant.
Sure. So ADA, the National College for Digital Skills, was set up to really address the digital skills gap in the UK. It was a partnership with government, but also with industry to shape the curriculum and to help learners get a digital skills apprenticeship while also having a sixth form college very much focused on digital skills. And the college was set up in Tottenham, in Haringey, because it's an area of high levels of deprivation. And we wanted to use technology as a way to really help young people with social mobility.
Right. And how long were you there for?
So I was officially working with ADA for over a year, like about 14 months. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, I was involved as a curriculum advisor since the very inception when Mark Smith, who's the CEO, had come up with the idea of a code college. So since then, I've been supporting on the curriculum as an advisor because I studied computer engineering more than 2 decades ago back in Singapore.
Right.
And I'm very passionate about more young people having the technical, creative, and entrepreneurial skills that help them shape their future and their careers. So
are you still any good at coding? Are you still any good at coding?
You know, I do a bit of coding with my kids, but it's so different from what I learned. And the technology has moved on, and I've basically moved from technology to more business and entrepreneurial areas. So I wouldn't be as good as a coder now, like how I was maybe 2 decades ago.
Yeah, of course. That's a really interesting journey. I had no idea that you'd done that at university. That's really interesting. And then from National College of Digital Skills, you went on to Nesta. Now, obviously, I was about to say I know what Nesta does, but I know and I also don't know because you're never quite sure. But Nesta is hugely influential, isn't it? I mean, what exactly is Nesta and what did you do there?
So Nesta was set up more than 20 years ago as the National Endowment for Science, Technology and the Arts. And now it's an independent charity where we're looking at solving some of the big challenges in our world using innovation. And at Nesta, I led our work in education innovation across research, grant making, and impact investments. And one of the things we did is to convene key stakeholders across government, businesses, civil society to really make education much more broader, fairer, and smarter. Because as we all agree, we need education to change and to be suitable for the 21st century.
So obviously this series is called Rethinking Education. And everybody who comes on obviously has an idea of why education needs to be rethought and needs to be reworked. So what does that actually mean to you? What does rethinking education mean to you?
I think we really need to reshape education, understand the purpose of why we are teaching learners. And if you think about it, 3 main reasons why we need to reshape or rethink education, reimagine education. First of all, it's the rapid pace of change. So you've seen how technology has really changed the way we live and work. Some of the companies that are leading the way now didn't even exist more than 10 years ago. And if you think about it, we want to help every child flourish no matter what happens. And we want to build the skills needed to navigate an uncertain future and solve complex problems.
Because that's one of the things that you identified, wasn't it? This this kind of skills mismatch. So what do you mean by that mismatch? What does that mean?
So if you think about it, even though there are a large number of jobs that are out there, a lot of young people are not finding the jobs. So young people are seen as unprepared for the world of work. And if you talk to employers, they're saying that even though they've got the qualifications, they're still struggling to fill some of these roles, whether it's in digital or technology, or even in other areas, other sectors as well. So, even though they might have the academic qualification, they lack some of the skills around collaboration, communication, empathy, teamwork. So, the skills mismatch is much more around the holistic skills that are sometimes missed out in the school system.
And in the pursuit of grades and high scores and high stakes tests and that kind of thing,
yeah.
Is that what we're saying? Is that we're actually losing a lot of the skills that actually employers are looking for?
Yeah. So there's such a huge focus on exams and league tables that sometimes kids are just preparing for the exam and for getting a good grade so that they can then get into university and then do well in university and get a job. But
yeah, well, I remember studying for my my science GCSEs, and I always disliked science for whatever reason. And I just remember, I would walk to school every morning with flashcards, and I would just, it was just rote learning the whole time. Nothing was going in class. I just rote learning, and I got decent grades from that. And I think that almost shouldn't even be possible, to just be able to learn something from flashcards, get through an exam, and then continue with my disinterest in science for the rest of my life. That seems to be a real shame, but that's happening a lot in schools, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just rote learning is not enough. Yes, you need to have the basic knowledge to be able to use it and apply that knowledge in solving problems, but just having that is not going to help you if you can't apply it in solving unique problems. The real life is not like school where you've got a defined question and a defined set of answers and you try and figure it out. But when you come to the real world, you not only are shaping the questions and trying to understand the question, form a hypothesis, test it out, and that sort of skill comes only by applying that knowledge to different settings and learning from feedback when things don't work.
Well, that's it. I mean, real life is messy, isn't it? It's very messy and it's tricky, and there's all sorts of unexpected twists and turns. Whereas in school, we're trying to pigeonhole things in a way which makes it very, convergent, isn't it? Everything is going to the one destination, which is the exam, and every single module lines up really nicely. And if you line them all up, everything will be okay. But I mean, I remember coming out of school and then going to university, and coming out of university and going into the world of work. And I got the absolute fright of my life, because I was like, this is absolutely not like the system that I've kind of been brought up with, or at least gone through up until now. And I found the transition really, really tough. So if they're the kind of things that we actually, we're actually identifying, and that's why we need to rethink education. What do we actually need to do to change education? And you've got 2 points here, and I'm going to pick up on your second point first, which is policy level. So what do we need to do to change education? And one of the things that you were talking about was we need to change things on a policy level. Well, the reason why I want to go for that one first is because, having worked at Nesta and also the National College of Digital Skills, you'll be really familiar with education policy and how that works. But the general sense that I get is that is really too slow for the people that want it to be changed. So what's going on there, and how does policy level work?
So one of the biggest challenges is that policy is set by the government, and that changes. And because of ideological differences, when each new government comes in, they have a different set of policies, or different set of curriculum and so on. And that impacts learners, it impacts teachers, and the whole education system. I think if you look at England, it's a real outlier compared to other nations. And there's such a huge focus on just the knowledge and not enough on building social and emotional skills, or even building other vocational skills. So there has to be that change at a policy level where more investment is made into teacher training, into infrastructure, into making the curriculum much more holistic. And I'm really proud of the work that has been going on over the last few years, especially around using technology to solve some of the challenges around teacher workload, around personalizing learning, and helping with formative assessments. But that change, it has to come from policy, but also at a grassroots level, that change has to be made. So one example of that is, Nesta had worked with others and with government to bring computing into the curriculum. So the curriculum changed, and now every kid learns computing, but then not enough kids are doing it at A levels, and not enough girls are doing it at A levels or GCSE, because the curriculum is too theoretical and dry, and it hasn't had the impact that we had hoped for, where we had hoped that more people would build these skills at a younger age. So there is a disconnect between policy and practice, and we need to understand what actually happens at the grassroots level. Do we have the right support? Do we have the teachers who can teach it? Do we have the right infrastructure and the right sort of motivation for learners, so that they are learning these new subjects that have been put into place as part of a new curriculum?
Right. And do you, when you talk about the grassroots movement, are you actually talking about what happens in the classroom, or are you talking about more like popular public opinion? What's your kind of perception of this grassroots movement?
I was thinking about it much more from the teachers, the parents, and the school leaders who can bring about change, because there's a notion that change in education will happen when policymakers decide that they change the curriculum or they change the funding model and so on. But I think that parents, businesses, teachers, school leaders have a lot of autonomy and ability to influence the system. And if they can come together and have this big conversation around what's the purpose of education, how do we ensure that our kids are prepared for this rapidly changing future, and how do we make sure that it's much more inclusive and equitable, because at the moment, social mobility hasn't improved. There are huge learning losses, and 1/3 of the population just lags behind and is seen as a failure within the education system. So how do we improve outcomes for all learners and improve the opportunities? I do believe that teachers, parents, businesses, and school leaders have a huge role to play in shaping the system.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that. And that kind of nicely brings us on to the third question, which is how to make that happen. And one of the first things that you put on there is collaboration. So this idea of, businesses working with schools, and maybe, and we'll get onto parental engagement a bit later, but how do you, often, certainly from, being a teacher myself, teachers have a very interesting relationship with business, I suppose, because they see school as this kind of bubble, I suppose, within which they should be, protected and all this kind of thing. But and we see some really good examples of how businesses get involved. How do you see that, that partnership between, businesses and school, public and private?
I think first and foremost, it's about businesses working closely with schools to try and bring real world problems into the classroom. So rather than just learning maths or English in a very theoretical way, could you apply it into the real world problems? That's one. The second thing would be around funding. So one example of that is if you look at the National Tuition Program, along with government, businesses, and civil society are co-funding the tuition catch-up program for disadvantaged kids. And that's another example where collectively, by bringing together resources, change can happen much more quickly. And then thirdly, I would say it's around upskilling and reskilling, and also around helping raise aspirations. So for example, a lot of kids might not have parents or role models who are working in high growth industries. And by bringing employers to be involved in schools, both in shaping the curriculum, but also as role models and as mentors and coaches, we can really influence the aspirations, but also the motivation for learners to continue to explore and learn new things.
Because they actually see the path that they're being that's being offered to them. I mean, that is something that, I suppose that is one thing that policy, I mean, you'll know better than me, I suppose, but careers has been something which has been really badly done for a long time. And now the Gatsby benchmarks is one of the things that has been brought into schools, hasn't it? Is that an example of policy working well?
Absolutely. I think the Gatsby benchmarks have done an amazing amount of good in setting the standard and really showing what good looks like and helping schools understand what they need to do to make sure that they're delivering good career advice to learners. And the Careers and Enterprise Company have done a fantastic job in terms of really mobilizing career advisors and working in the so-called cold spots around the country when it comes to careers advice. So more needs to happen in terms of really linking up employers with schools and in providing a work experience or providing opportunities for young people to experience the world of work.
Right, and does that kind of invitation for businesses to start engaging more with schools, do you think that is possibly a way to actually lead to them having more influence on the curriculum? Because one of the things that we do see all the time is businesses and companies, CEOs and all the rest of it coming out and saying what they're learning in school is of little interest to what I need them to do when they come and work for me, or go into this industry or become an entrepreneur or whatever it is. Is this one of the first steps to actually changing that curriculum? Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. That's what we did when I was back at Ada. So my role there was Chief Industry Officer, and to really work with our industry partners to shape the curriculum, to get them involved in delivering certain sessions so that kids really see the impact of their learning and how they are involved in solving real life problems. Because when, as a young person, you're involved in solving a real world problem, it can be a really powerful experience. It helps you see the relevance of what you're learning and really give you a sense of agency and purpose behind the things that you do in school. It also helps learners understand the interdisciplinary nature of problem solving. So, our current school is very much divided by subjects. But when you're in the real world, there are no boundaries across certain subjects, right? It's the coming together of different disciplines that help solve problems. So I think the more we can give learners the exposure to the real world, the more likely they are going to be better prepared to succeed in the future.
Right. Okay. And one of the things that you've got down for how to make this kind of how to make this happen, how to rethink education. You've got technology now. Obviously, as a computer scientist, you'll probably naturally gravitate towards this. But I think there is a huge mistrust, isn't there, of technology in education. So how exactly do you see what role do you see technology playing in education?
Even though I'm a computer scientist, I truly believe that technology is just a tool. It's how we use it, and we need to build it in a way that it meets the real needs of the users. So I believe that teachers and learners will be crucial in defining what sort of technology they need to help with their learning and their teaching. I think technology has huge potential in personalizing learning, in reducing the teacher's workload so that they can then focus on really coaching the students, helping build their confidence and understanding them and giving them the opportunity to build some of these skills like creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, teamwork, problem solving. If technology can do the bit around the planning, the admin, the corrections, the marking.
The kind of the knowledge bit, the kind of the rote learning bit.
Yeah, and even the feedback into parents, like if they have more clarity and transparency into what their children are learning, then they can support the learners as well.
Right.
So I think technology plays a huge role, but it will always be in a supportive and a complementary way. It's not going to replace teachers. I think it's about using technology to really benefit learners so that they can chart their journey and help build the areas where they have weaknesses, but also understand their own strengths.
Right.
And to help teachers teach much better in terms of supporting their learners in a much more holistic way, and
Right.
taking away the bits that are more admin and routine or boring.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, one of the things, just as a side note, one of the things that I see with sort of, you know, education technology is that there's a real focus on sort of diagnostics and, you know, which area do they need, you know, and I do appreciate that is important, but is that also a reflection of the curriculum itself? Because you know, rather than using technology in a way which is much more, you know, aligned to sort of creativity or problem solving, it does seem to be very sort of diagnostic. Is that a reflection of the curriculum that we've got at the moment, or is it something else?
I think there are a bunch of different factors, right? Curriculum is one. The second thing would be metrics and the accountability framework. So,
The assessment.
you know, the things that are easy to automate or easy to test are the things that the curriculum has been that way for a long time.
Sort of what gets measured gets managed.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, it's a function of both the curriculum, but also the metrics and the accountability system, because, you know, we do want to ensure quality and ensure that learners are learning. But there are ways of measuring creativity, social skills, emotional skills, communication skills. It's just that the system needs to change so that these other bits are also as valued as maths and English.
Yeah. And the diagnostic side of things. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think I think it's a middle of the road answer, which is exactly the one we need. We don't need to polarize things, do we? And the last one here is parental engagement. Now, this is one that I'm particularly interested in. So, you know, how can we make change happen in education? And I think, you know, certainly there's been a lot of hard work from people like yourself, you know, especially while you're at Nesta on the policy side, you know, that kind of top-down approach. And I think people automatically assume that, you know, nothing will change until it changes at the top. But you think parental engagement is really crucial. So what are your ideas there?
So as a parent of two primary school kids, I'm really passionate about changing the education system and, you know, bringing about that system level change. I do think that parents have an important voice, and, you know, they can get involved as governors, they can get involved as, you know, people who are supporting the school and opening their horizons or their mindset into the broader changes that are happening in the workplace. But also, if parents were to get involved in shaping the narrative around the purpose for education and, you know, how schools can better prepare their learners and their kids by having a much more holistic outlook, you know, that focuses on happiness and well-being alongside academic excellence and employability skills. I think that would make a huge difference, because if you think about it, you know, already there are some parents who set up their own schools, right, through the academy chains, and they have a lot more freedom to shape the curriculum and to try out more experimental things to, you know, get students to be more creative and define the problems that they want to work on. So parents do have a voice, and increasingly it's about understanding how they can be engaged. If you think about the well-off parents, you know, they are able to either spend time with their kids, taking them to museums or arts or drama or other activities, or they are able to provide a tutor who can, you know, give additional support beyond the school. And I think that's what's missing when you think about the state sector, right? The excessive focus on just the exams at the expense of arts and creativity. has a negative impact. And there's quite a lot of evidence that we need to build these holistic skills in learners.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the really interesting things, isn't it? I mean, it seems that, I mean, when you were talking there and you were saying, you know, parents can get involved as governors and that kind of thing, I was thinking, well, a lot of parents who might listen will think, do you know what, I haven't got the time for that, and I haven't got the inclination to it either. But certainly on the more holistic side, on the art side, on the extracurricular side, that I feel like that's somewhere that parents can really have a voice, can't they? And say, you know, okay, yes, I understand that you're pushing my son or daughter through these challenges, and they're, you know, largely academic, but, you know, insisting on that extracurricular stuff, or insisting on that more artistic stuff, or whether it's sport or music or drama. And I think if schools, I mean, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I think that the more parents feel disengaged, the less they say, and the less they actually say, the less demand is felt. How do you see that?
That's a really good point. I think a lot of parents might not have the time or the confidence to get involved. But I guess one of the things, or my message to parents would be, you know, this is the future of your kids, and, you know, collectively, by coming together and by, you know, there are a lot of free resources now, right, to learn. And if they can sort of help their children understand, you know, the wide range of opportunities that are out there, but also influence the school to make sure that they are giving these opportunities to learners. So parents can play a part, but it is challenging and it is hard. But already we are seeing some changes happening where collectively the community is coming together and supporting those who need the support the most.
Right. Well, that's perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time, Joycey. It was fascinating as always to talk to you. You always have such a good way of putting things. So thanks for making the time, and
Thanks a lot,
I hope
Bill.
you enjoyed it.
Thank you.